"She's the only one who never helped us," my mother said, and 60 people clapped. I sat there frozen, drowning in applause for a lie. My siblings beamed like they'd rehearsed it. But what shattered me wasn't the betrayal. It was the silence afterward. No one stood up. No one corrected her. And worse, she'd already handed my brother's version of events to the estate lawyer. 90 days left to rewrite my name or lose everything. They wanted to erase 2 decades of sacrifice with one speech, but I kept every receipt, every canceled check. So I booked the same restaurant, same room, and I brought a projector. My name is Melissa Carver, and I'm 45 years old. Every morning at 6, I balance 2 households from my home office, mine and my mother's, tracking every payment in color-coded folders and automated schedules. Steam rises from my coffee as I click through spreadsheet tabs, confirming mother's grocery delivery will arrive before her afternoon nap. My younger siblings chase their dreams across the country, while I quietly handle the midnight roof leaks and utility bills that keep our family's foundation solid. Mother has always preferred grand gestures, birthday toasts, family photos, and public praise, over examining the quiet paper trail of actual support. She never noticed how I saved every receipt, every bank statement, every canceled check in chronological order. My accounting degree taught me that numbers tell the truest story. But let me start from the beginning. I should have known something was wrong when Mother chose Restaurant Verona for her 70th birthday dinner. The place dripped old-world elegance, all crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She'd always been drawn to spotlight, moments like a moth to flame. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and the air feels different? That's how it hit me the moment I stepped through those brass-handled doors. 60 guests filled the private dining room, their voices bouncing off cream-colored walls between delicate clinks of silverware and wine glasses. The scent of garlic and fresh-baked bread wrapped around everything like a warm blanket. But something felt off, like finding a crack in your favorite coffee mug. I took my assigned seat near the center table, right where everyone could see me. That should have been my second warning. My brother David caught my eye from across the room and gave me this little smirk that made my stomach twist. My sister Rachel merely glanced away, suddenly fascinated by her napkin. Mother waited until the dessert plates were cleared. Perfect timing. Everyone was full, relaxed, maybe a little wine-tipsy. She stood, crystal champagne flute catching the light, and began what seemed like a typical mother's sentimental birthday speech. "My dearest friends and family," she said, her voice carrying that theatrical warmth she'd perfected over years of community theater. "Tonight, as I celebrate 70 years of life's blessings, I want to acknowledge my children." I felt my shoulders ease. This was familiar territory. Mother's. Standard performance piece, but then her tone shifted, hardened just slightly around the edges. "David, who visits every holiday and never forgets to call. Rachel, who's been my rock through every medical appointment." She paused, and I swear the air got thicker. And Melissa, the way she said my name made my fingers go cold around my water glass. "My eldest, who," another pause, longer this time, "who stands as the only one of my children who never helped us when we needed it most." The room went silent. Not the comfortable kind, the sharp, cutting kind that slices right through you. I sat there, frozen, as 6 decades worth of canceled checks and bank transfers flashed through my mind like a high-speed film reel. 20 years of quiet support, of making sure bills got paid while my siblings sent birthday cards and made holiday appearances. Someone started clapping, then another. Person joined in, and another, until the whole room erupted in supportive applause. For her, not me. They were applauding a lie, and worse, it felt rehearsed, like they'd all been waiting for this moment. My cheeks burned as I caught David's satisfied nod. Rachel offered one of her pitying little shrugs, the kind that says, "What can you do?" while really meaning, "You deserve this." I'm not sure how I managed to keep my face neutral, but decades of Handling Mother's dramatic moments had taught me well. My hands shook as I reached for my purse, car keys jingling against my phone. Every receipt, every wire transfer record, every grocery delivery confirmation I'd saved suddenly felt like ammunition instead of just good accounting. Standing up, I forced my lips into the kind of thank you smile I'd perfected at corporate meetings. "Lovely party, Mother," I said, my voice steadier than my legs as I walked to the coat check. The weight of 60 pairs of eyes followed me across that gleaming hardwood floor. At the door, I turned back one last time. Mother met my gaze with that cool, satisfied look she usually reserved for winning arguments. But this wasn't just another family spat over holiday plans or paint colors for the living room. This was character assassination, performed for maximum impact. Looking at all those faces, friends, extended family, neighbors, I realized something crucial. This story would stick. This version of me, the neglectful daughter, would become their truth unless I rewrote it with hard evidence. The maitre d' handed me my coat, and I clutched it like armor. Behind me, the party had already resumed its rhythm of clinking glasses and polite laughter, as if they hadn't just witnessed an execution. You know that hollow feeling when you're waiting for a text that never comes? Multiply that by 7 days, and you'll get a taste of what that next week felt like. Our family group chat, usually buzzing with dinner plans and forwarded memes, turned into a digital ghost town, at least for me. Every morning, I'd check my phone, hoping someone had cooled down enough to reach out. Instead, I got to watch Rachel post artfully filtered photos of flower arrangements she'd bought for Mother. "Just because," her captions would chirp, followed by heart emojis and comments from everyone except me. Even her routine, "Who's free to take Mom to the podiatrist?" messages carefully skipped over my name. I kept thinking about all those years I'd scheduled appointments without announcing it to the world. No photos, no fanfare, just quiet competence that apparently counted for nothing now. Ever had someone talk about you like you're not even alive anymore? That's what it felt like when Mother called Cousin Rita. I only know because Rita's daughter Amy works at my dental office. "Your mom was just telling everyone about that awful birthday dinner," Amy said during my cleaning, her voice dropping to that sympathetic whisper people use at funerals. "About how you never helped out all these years." The story was spreading like a virus, mutating with each retelling. I could feel my reputation crumbling, in real time. Then came Tuesday morning, and everything got deadlier serious. A certified letter arrived from Attorney James Keating, Mother's lawyer since before Dad passed. My hands actually trembled while opening it, and let me tell you, my hands don't tremble easily, not even during tax season. The letter was printed on that expensive paper law firms love, but it might as well have been printed on sandpaper for how it felt in my grip. I had to read it twice before the words really sank in. Draft schedule for final asset distribution. 90 days. They were giving me 90 days before everything got set in stone. You ever hear a clock start ticking inside your own chest? That's what happened when I hit the last paragraph. Tick, tock. 90 days to prove 20 years of support, or watch both my inheritance and my reputation get buried under Mother's revised history. I sat down at my kitchen table, the same one where I used to spread out all those bills and checkbooks, and started listing everything I needed to prove. The mortgage payments I covered during Dad's heart surgery in 2015, when everyone else was too busy to handle paperwork. The utility bills I paid through 3 winter blackouts because Mother couldn't figure out the online payment system. All those grocery deliveries during lockdown when David and Rachel were quarantining, but somehow still posting beach photos. The midnight timestamp on Keating's letter seemed to pulse like a warning light. I pulled up my calendar app and marked the deadline in red. 90 days. Not even 3 months to excavate 2 decades of financial archaeology. Looking at that countdown, I knew 2 things with absolute certainty. I couldn't do this alone, and most of what I needed was probably still in Mother's basement. Those color-coded folders I'd maintained for years were still down there somewhere, tucked away in filing cabinets that had survived 3 floods and 1 minor fire. Tomorrow would need to start with finding an ally, someone who understood both numbers and family drama, someone who could help me turn paper trails into proof before Mother's version of history became permanent. I stared at that letter until the words blurred, my kitchen clock ticking away, minutes I couldn't afford to waste. Time wasn't just money anymore. It was truth itself, slipping through my fingers like sand. There's something weirdly comforting about desperate Google searches at 6 a.m. Maybe it's the quiet, or maybe it's just knowing you're not the only one awake and hunting for answers. I was halfway through my second coffee when I remembered Mrs. Lillian, the retired accountant who'd handled Dad's estate with the kind of methodical precision that made even the IRS back off. Have you ever noticed how some people just radiate competence? That was Mrs. Lillian. When I called, she didn't waste time with small talk. Melissa, give me 20 minutes to grab my briefcase. Which storage unit is it? I hadn't even mentioned storage units, but of course she knew. She'd been the one who suggested I keep duplicate records off-site after that pipe burst in Mother's basement. 5 years ago. Unit 147 at Safekeep, I told her. The one with the green door near the office. I remember. She paused, and I could hear papers shuffling. Bring coffee. The good kind, not that break room stuff. An hour later, I pulled into Safekeep's gravel lot. Mrs. Lillian's silver Volvo was already there, and she was standing by my unit's roll-up door like a general planning a campaign. The familiar scent of cardboard and cedar hit me as soon as I lifted the door. Funny how smells can take you back. I remembered packing these boxes during quieter times, back when I thought keeping good records was just basic adulting, not future-proofing against family betrayal. Mrs. Lillian didn't ask if I was telling the truth about the support I'd given Mother. She just pulled a folding table from her car trunk and snapped it open like she was setting up a field hospital. Start with the last 5 years, she said, accepting the coffee I'd brought. Recent evidence hits harder. We worked through the morning, sorting bankers' boxes by decade. My fingers turned black with dust as we excavated my financial history. The sight of Mother's address in my old IBM Selectric font on all those envelopes hit harder than I expected. Each one was a little time capsule of responsibility, proof that while others posted vacation photos, I was making sure the lights stayed on. I caught Mrs. Lillian watching me as I logged each item, carefully photographing fronts and backs with my phone. Good, she said. Digital backup first, but we'll need originals for anything crucial. She pulled out a legal pad and started sketching what she called a proof map, a timeline of major expenses and regular payments. Every few minutes, she'd circle something and mutter, "Need the original for this one," or "Bank might still have records here." The real gold showed up in a box marked 2019-2020, a stack of roof repair invoices from when that big oak branch came down during the February storm. Right behind those was a winter gas bill with a 4-figure balance, paid directly from my checking account because Mother's card kept getting declined. "Look at these transfer dates," Mrs. Lillian said, laying out bank statements like playing cards. "Regular pattern. Monthly support, not just emergencies." She tapped her pen against her teeth, a habit I remembered from the estate days. "This is good, Melissa. This is very good." The knot in my chest started to loosen. Maybe I wasn't crazy. Maybe I could prove what I'd known all along, that I'd been the steady foundation while everyone else played at being the decorative columns. Then Mrs. Lillian looked up from a particularly dense page of notes. "Quick question," she said, in that careful tone people use when they're about to pop your bubble. "Who got to Attorney Keating first?" Just like that, the knot was back. The call to Attorney Keating's office started with his secretary's polite deflection and ended with my stomach in free fall. "Mr. Keating asked me to inform you that he's already received a comprehensive family history from your brother," she said, managing to sound both sympathetic and dismissive. "But you're welcome to submit additional documentation for consideration. You know that feeling when you realize someone's been writing your story without you?" That's what hit me as I pressed the phone harder against my ear. When exactly did my brother meet with Mr. Keating? 2 days after your mother's birthday dinner. Her voice carried that special tone reserved for people who've already lost but don't know it yet. I put the call on speaker so Mrs. Lillian could hear. The secretary continued with practiced smoothness. Mr. Keating was quite impressed by your brother's detailed account of the family's course of dealing over the past 20 years. Course of dealing. Legal words. Brother's words now. My fingers curled into fists as she went on. The established pattern of past practice suggests. I'll have documentation to you by Friday, I cut in, fighting to keep my voice level. Extensive documentation. Of course. Another practiced pause. We'll add it to the file. The line went dead, and I stared at Mrs. Lillian across the folding table. He got there first, with his version. She was already writing on her yellow legal pad, her strokes sharp enough to tear the paper. First mover advantage, she muttered. But not game over. She turned the pad toward me. She'd written, counter narrative plus proof, and underlined it 3 times. They're not just looking at numbers, she said. They're buying a story. Your brother gave them one. Now we need to give them a better one, backed by every receipt, every transfer, every canceled check we can find. I nodded, my mind already racing ahead to logistics. I can have scans ready by Friday morning. Start establishing our tempo. Good. She tapped her pen against the pad. Make it early Friday. And include a spreadsheet index, cross-reference everything by date and payee. Make it impossible to ignore the pattern. I spent that night in front of my laptop, converting paper trails into digital proof. Every few minutes, I'd glance at the stack of originals beside me, as if they might vanish if I looked away too long. The scanner hummed steadily, transforming 20 years of quiet support into searchable PDFs. My eyes burned as I built the spreadsheet Mrs. Lillian suggested, column after column of dates, amounts, and descriptions. Each entry felt like a small revenge against brother's smooth lies. Transfer, $2,475 for roof repairs. Check, $1,890 for winter utilities. Wire, $3,200 for emergency plumbing. The numbers added up to a story he couldn't erase. Around midnight, I booked Friday's courier. Early morning delivery, signature required. I could almost see brother's satisfied grin when he'd walked out of Keating's office, thinking he'd sealed my fate with a few well-chosen phrases about the absent daughter who moved away and contributed nothing. The final PDF saved at 1:57 a.m. My hands shook slightly as I typed the email that would accompany the delivery. Facts had to matter. Numbers had to speak louder than narrative. But a cold whisper in my mind wondered if anyone would really look at these files, really count these years of quiet sacrifice. A gust of wind rattled the storage unit's door, making me jump. The sound echoed off metal walls, reminding me I was sitting alone in a storage facility at 2 a.m, trying to prove I wasn't the villain in my own family's story. I powered down the laptop, gathered the originals into their acid-free boxes, and tried not to think about gatekeepers who might never even open the files I'd spent all night preparing. After that brutal phone call about my brother's preemptive strike, I threw myself into what Mrs. Lillian called our evidence sprint. Ever sort through 20 years of your life in color-coded folders? Let me tell you, it's like archaeology with a stopwatch. We commandeered my dining room table the next morning, spreading out decade-old bank statements like battle plans. Mrs. Lillian brought her reading glasses and 3 different colors of sticky tabs. I'd never been so grateful for my obsessive filing habits. Here's the mother lode, I said, pulling out a thick manila envelope. Dad's heart attack, winter of '03. The paperwork inside still carried that hospital smell, all antiseptic and fear. I covered the mortgage for 6 months while they dealt with insurance. Mrs. Lillian's pen scratched steadily as she logged each payment. Routing number? Check. Sequence. Memo line. Mom and Dad mortgage Jan '03. She glanced up. You were thorough even back then. Had to be. Mom never looked at statements unless something bounced. I remembered those endless nights at their kitchen table, calculator in hand, making sure their lights stayed on while they slept upstairs. The evidence piled up like snow. Emergency dental work for Mom in '08 when her crown cracked on Christmas Eve. Utility payments. During the blackouts of 2012, I'd moved the funds straight from my savings so they wouldn't freeze. Every check, every transfer had my handwriting on it somewhere. Even the grocery delivery services from last year's lockdown had my credit card timestamps. Mrs. Lillian developed a system, annotating each entry with banking codes that transformed emotional memories into cold, hard proof. Intent matters legally, she explained, highlighting another memo line. These notes show you weren't just throwing random money around, you were consciously supporting your parents. We worked through lunch, then dinner. My fingers got papery from handling old files, and my eyes burned from squinting at faded ink. But by midnight, we had it. A 3-inch binder tabbed by year, with every transaction cross-referenced in a digital index. "This is court-ready," Mrs. Lillian said, closing the binder. With satisfaction. "No one can look at this and claim you never helped." The next morning, I drove to Attorney Keating's office, the binder heavy on the passenger seat beside me. Remember how I said, "Order never survives spectacle"? For once, I thought order might win. The reception area smelled like leather and money. The woman behind the desk gave me that professional smile that says, "You're not important enough to remember." I have. "Documentation for the Carver estate matter," I said, sliding the binder across her desk. She checked something on her computer. "I'll make sure Mr. Keating receives it." The binder disappeared behind the frosted glass door with a soft click. Standing there in that quiet lobby, I felt something I hadn't since Mom's birthday dinner. Hope. Real, solid hope, backed by paper and ink and 20 years of canceled checks. I'd done it. I'd found the proof. Even Brother Smooth Talk couldn't argue with bank routing numbers. That lightness stayed with me as I walked to my car. The spring air felt cleaner somehow, like truth had cleared away some invisible smog. My phone buzzed just as I reached for the door handle. "Miss Carver?" It was Keating's assistant. "About the documentation you just dropped off." "Yes?" My hand froze on the handle. "We'll need verifiable originals, not scans. These copies would be inadmissible for estate purposes." The word inadmissible hit me like a slap. I stared at my glove compartment where I'd stashed backup flash drives of everything, suddenly as useless as digital ghosts. But I swallowed hard. Every transaction is there, the routing numbers, the dates. "I understand," she said in that same professional tone, "but we require original documents." I slumped against my car, that one word, inadmissible, echoing like a bad joke. You know that moment when you realize you've built your whole defense on quicksand? Yeah, that was me in that parking lot. Mrs. Lillian answered on the first ring. I could hear her shuffling papers in the background. "They won't accept the scans," I said, my voice hollow. "Not even the indexed ones." "Deep breath, Melissa." Her calm steadied me. We knew this might happen. Legal proceedings love their originals. But we spent days on those scans. My free hand clenched around my car keys. "Every single transaction is documented. And that work wasn't wasted," she said. "Now we know exactly what to request from the banks. Original statements, canceled check copies. They keep records going back decades." I pulled out my phone and opened my countdown app. Day 67 glared back at me. Will the banks move fast enough? If we start today. I heard her shuffling through papers again. "First Harbor Bank was your main account, right? Start there. They can produce certified copies of everything that cleared through them." I was already plotting the fastest route to First Harbor's main branch. "What about the other proof? The utility bills, the repair invoices? Those we can get notarized. But Melissa," she paused. "The most compelling documents, your parents' mortgage payments, those emergency medical bills, where are the originals?" My stomach dropped. "The boxes in Mother's hallway closet." Last fall's cleaning spree flashed through my mind, Mom insisting we reorganize, me carefully labeling everything Mother files before stacking them away. Perfect, Mrs. Lillian said. We'll just need to. She's banned me from the house. The words tasted bitter. Right after the birthday dinner. Said I'm not welcome there. Anymore. Silence stretched between us. Finally, Mrs. Lillian sighed. One battle at a time. Let's start with the banks. First Harbor's marble lobby hadn't changed since I opened my account there 20 years ago. The same fake ficus trees, the same worn carpet paths to the teller windows. I filled out retrieval forms until my hand cramped, requesting 12 years of critical statements and canceled checks. The clerk, young enough to make me feel ancient, tapped at her keyboard. 5 to 7 business days for archives this old. I gripped the counter edge. There's no way to expedite? Sorry. She didn't sound sorry. Bank policy. Back in my car, I pulled up the calculator app. 7 business days. That would still leave us. I counted twice to be sure. Okay. Tight, but doable. Assuming nothing else went wrong. Which is exactly when something else went wrong. I tried calling. Mother first. Straight to voicemail. Not surprising. Then my sister. Mom's really upset about all this, Mel. Just let it go. Brother didn't even pick up. Standing in my own hallway, staring at the empty space where those boxes should have been. I felt the floor tilt beneath my carefully constructed timeline. Every critical original document, every paper trail of my loyalty, sat in Mother's closet like buried treasure. And she'd just declared, me persona non grata. I called Mother one more time, 1 ring, 2, 3. Yes? Her voice held that artificial brightness she used with strangers. Mom, I need to pick up my files from the hallway closet, the ones labeled, "Do not enter this house again." Each word fell like an ice cube. I won't have you disturbing things. Mom, please, those are my records, my bank statements. Click. I stood there with my phone still pressed to my ear, listening to dead air. The countdown app pulsed silently. Day 67. Every backup plan, every careful route to vindication had just slammed into a locked door with my mother's voice behind it. Mrs. Lillian's yellow legal pad sat on my kitchen table, covered in our neat plans and contingencies. But all I could see was that hallway closet, those critical boxes just out of reach, and a deadline that suddenly felt impossible to meet. I drove past Mother's house 3 times before finally parking under the old jacaranda tree. Remember that scorching August day when I'd lugged groceries up her walk, sweat dripping down my back? The purple blossoms had littered the sidewalk then too, making every step feel like walking through confetti. You know what's funny? Even now, with everything falling apart, my first instinct was to check if her recycling bins needed bringing in. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, mentally cataloging every crucial document locked away in her hallway closet. 20 years of careful record-keeping, all neatly labeled and filed away. The property tax payments I'd covered, utilities during Dad's hospital stay, even that shoebox marked receipts from the roof repair saga. Everything I needed to prove I hadn't abandoned them. My phone felt heavy in my hand as I dialed her number again. 1 ring, 2, 3. Yes? That artificial brightness again, like she was answering a telemarketer. Mom, please. I just need 10 minutes to get my files. That's all I'm asking. You chose yourself. Live with it. Her voice turned to steel. Then silence. Through my windshield, I watched her deliberately close the front curtains before I could even reach the gate. Message received, loud and clear. I fired off a text to my sister. Can you help me get my files from Mom's? Just need access to the hallway closet. Her response came suspiciously quick. Not a good time for drama, Mel. Maybe give it a few weeks? A few weeks. My countdown app mocked me from the dashboard. Day 64. The bank's 7-day timeline for archived statements suddenly felt like molasses compared to what sat just yards away behind that locked door. I called Mrs. Lillian, my voice shakier than I wanted to admit. She won't let me in. Won't even look at me. Deep breaths. she said. We'll focus on the bank certifications for now. First Harbor should have copies of... But the originals are right there. I gestured at the house, not caring that Mrs. Lillian couldn't see me. Every binder, every tax folder, every receipt that proves I didn't abandon them, just sitting in that closet while Mother plays gatekeeper. I know it's frustrating, but frustrating? I laughed, but it came out more like a hiccup. Try devastating. Try watching 20 years of proof slip away because your own mother decided you're the villain. The late afternoon sun caught the jacaranda petals, turning them deep violet against the concrete. How many times had I swept these same petals from Mother's walkway? How many silent acts of devotion lay buried in those closet files? My chest felt like it was being crushed in a vice. The weight of it all, the dinner humiliation, Brother's legal maneuvering, and now this locked door rejection, pressed down until each breath hurt. I started the car as dusk crept in, purple shadows stretching across Mother's manicured lawn. The drive home passed in a blur. I couldn't even remember if I'd stopped at any red lights. My own house felt hollow when I finally pulled into the garage. The grocery bags from earlier still sat in my trunk, but I couldn't summon the energy to unpack them. Let the ice cream melt. Let the vegetables wilt. What did it matter now? I left the hallway light on out of habit, that warm beacon I'd always kept burning for late-night emergency calls from Mother's house. Now it just illuminated the empty space where my proof should have been. Lying in bed, staring at my ceiling, an insidious thought crept in. What if I just stopped fighting? Let their version become truth? It would be easier than clawing through bank archives and begging for access to my own records. Easier than watching Mother's curtains close in my face again. The countdown app's soft glow reached me even with my phone face down. Day 64. Each tick brought me closer to either vindication or surrender. Maybe by morning, I'd find the strength to care which one won. My phone's buzz yanked me from a fitful sleep. Mrs. Lillian's name flashed on, the screen along with a voicemail notification. I'd missed her call by minutes. Melissa, dear. Her voice crackled through the speaker. I've been thinking about your situation all night. Remember what I always say about ledgers? The numbers tell their story whether people want to hear it or not. But here's the thing. If they chose to shame you publicly, you must answer publicly. Call me when you can. I sat up straighter, her words hitting me like a splash of cold water. If they brand you publicly, answer publicly. My fingers fumbled for the sticky notes on my nightstand, and I wrote it down in bold letters. You know that moment when an idea clicks and suddenly everything shifts? That's what her message did for me. I'd been thinking small, trying to whisper my defense through proper channels while my family shouted their version from the rooftops. Within 20 minutes, I was at Mrs. Lillian's kitchen table, the morning sun warming my coffee mug. So, what exactly are you suggesting? I asked. She spread out her yellow legal pad. First, we continue gathering those bank certifications. That's our foundation. But instead of submitting them quietly, she paused, tapping her pen. What if we presented everything at that final review dinner? Present how? Visually, dramatically. Her eyes sparkled. A slideshow of every transaction, every date, every amount. Let the numbers speak in high definition. I could already see it. Canceled checks projected 6 feet tall, bank statements that no one could ignore. Restaurant Verona has that blank wall in the private dining room, I said slowly. The same room where Mother... Perfect symmetry, don't you think? I pulled out my phone and dialed the restaurant. Yes, hi. I need to confirm something for the Carver family. Dinner next month. Do you have projection capabilities in the Tuscany room? An HDMI access? Mrs. Lillian reviewed each slide, suggesting tweaks. Remember, she said, we're not just proving payments. We're telling the story of 20 years of quiet support. But doubt crept in as I worked. What if this made me look desperate, vindictive? The whole community would be there, the same people who'd applauded Mother's accusations. If I miscalculated, I'd only cement their judgment. Your brother's already planted his narrative with the lawyer, Mrs. Lillian reminded me, reading my expression. Sometimes the only way past a lie is straight through it. I nodded, straightening my shoulders. She was right. I'd spent years being the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who handled things without fanfare. Look where that had gotten me. The RSVP form sat in my inbox, sent by Attorney Keating's office. I kept the response brief. Melissa Carver confirms attendance. Will bring materials to share during review. My cursor hovered over the send button. This was it, the point of no return. Once I hit send, I was committed to this public stand. I thought of Mother's curtains closing in my face, of my sister's dismissive text, of my brother's smug legal maneuvering. The mouse clicked almost by itself. Standing at my desk, calendar, I drew a thick red circle around the dinner date. 38 days left. 38 days to gather every certification, polish every slide, and steel my nerves for the moment I'd turn their spotlight into my stage. The sticky note with Mrs. Lillian's words caught my eye. If they brand you publicly, answer publicly. I smoothed it carefully and stuck it to my monitor's frame. My battle flag, right where I could see it. The first real break came on day 58. I'd been checking my mailbox 3 times daily, wearing a path in my hallway carpet, when that beautiful First Harbor Bank envelope finally arrived. My hands shook as I sliced it open. 12 certified canceled checks and 3 stamped transfer confirmations, all officially authenticated. You ever hold something that feels like pure gold? That's what those papers were to me. Mrs. Lillian met me at her dining room table, the late afternoon light streaming through her lace curtains. The smell of her signature Earl Grey tea filled the room as we spread out each document like precious artifacts. Look at this beauty, she said, holding up a check from 2015. Her magnifying glass traced the routing numbers. Perfect condition, and that memo line is clear as day. Mother's RX. I remembered writing that check. It was during that brutal flu season when Mother couldn't leave her bed for a week. The pharmacy had called about her insurance denial, and I'd handled it without even telling her. Just another quiet fix in a long string of them. 3 days later, on day 55, the second batch arrived. More ammunition for our cause. Mrs. Lillian and I worked like surgeons, matching each document against our master index. Every verified item went into her special scanner and then straight into our presentation. Watch this, she said, clicking through the slides. I've added high-contrast callouts to make the key details pop. The dates and amounts jumped off the screen in bold yellow, while memo lines like roof repair and gas winter glowed in electric blue. Even from the back of a room, nobody could miss these numbers. You know that feeling when you're preparing for something big and you just need everything to be perfect? That was me with the equipment. I bought a portable projector, top of the line, crystal clear resolution. Grabbed 2 HDMI cables, because backups matter, and loaded everything onto both my laptop and a USB drive. Belt, suspenders, and then some. The week before the dinner, I started practicing my narration. First in my car during my commute, then standing in my home office after work. This payment of $2,147 was made on December 12th, 2018. I'd start strong, then my voice would shake. Deep breath, start again. By the 3rd night, the tremor was gone. By the 5th, I could run through the whole presentation without a single crack in my voice. Tonight, dinner night, I chose my outfit carefully. A navy blazer and matching slacks. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed revenge, just quiet competence, professional. The kind of outfit that says, I've got receipts. The sunset painted everything in copper as I pulled into Restaurant Verona's parking lot. Same spot I'd parked in for Mother's birthday dinner. Funny how life comes full circle, isn't it? Inside, the maitre d' recognized me immediately. Ms. Carver, yes. The Tuscany room is ready for your equipment setup. He gestured toward the familiar double doors. Your party has already arrived. My heels clicked against the hardwood as I approached. Through the doorway, I could see them all seated under that massive crystal chandelier. the same one that had sparkled above Mother's accusations 2 months ago. Attorney Keating sat at the head of the table, his leather portfolio open in front of him. Sister perched next to Mother, both of them with identical rigid postures. Brother lounged in his chair, looking like he'd already won whatever game he thought we were playing. None of them looked up as I moved to the front of the room. Just the soft clink of water glasses and murmured conversations that died when I got too close. Fine by me. I had work to do. I set my laptop on the side table and connected the HDMI cable to the projector. One click and my title slide illuminated the cream-colored wall. Financial Records, 2003-2023. The projector's fan hummed quietly, like a countdown timer. Mrs. Lillian's sticky note was folded in my blazer pocket. I didn't need to read it anymore. Those words had become part of my backbone. If they brand you publicly, answer publicly. I stood beside the glowing screen, 20 years of proof loaded and ready. My finger rested on the laptop's arrow key. Just one tap would start it all. I took one last deep breath and pressed the arrow key. The first slide filled the wall. Mortgage payment, March 12, 2010. Below the title, a certified check materialized, its paid stamp standing out in deep red. You could practically feel the whole room lean forward, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. This payment, I said, my voice steadier than I'd dreamed possible, was made to First Harbor Mortgage from my personal account, number 2847 for $2,136.42. I let my finger trace the signature line. That's my signature there, dated March 12, 2010. This was during Dad's first heart scare, when the regular payment got missed in all the hospital confusion. I clicked forward. Up came the utility statements, 3 consecutive months of power bills paid directly from my account during that brutal winter when the furnace kept failing. Each one bore a bank verification stamp that practically glowed under the projector's beam. Here we have December through February 2012. Total payments, $847.63. My voice had found its rhythm now. You'll notice the memo line on each one. Mother's Gas Electric. You know that moment when you can feel a room's energy shift, when whispers start rippling through the crowd like wind through tall grass. That's what was happening. I could hear them comparing dates, remembering where they'd been, realizing what these numbers meant. Mrs. Lillian stood in the back corner, giving me these small, precise nods, like a conductor keeping time. Each nod said, "Keep going. You've got this. The truth is on your side." Next came the medical copays. 5 different specialist visits during Mom's vertigo episodes in 2015. Then the roof repair, that massive $4,800 check from 2017 when the Colonial Revival shingles had to be special ordered. Every single document bore either a bank certification stamp or a transfer confirmation number. I could see Brother's face changing. That smug smile he'd worn since the birthday dinner was evaporating, like morning dew. Sister's hand, which had been resting on Mother's shoulder in such a picture-perfect show of support, dropped away as if the contact suddenly burned. During lockdown, I continued, clicking to the next section, grocery deliveries became essential. The screen filled with a grid of Instacart receipts, each one matched with its corresponding debit card transaction. Weekly deliveries, averaging $187 per order, from March 2020 through December 2021. Total expenditure, $16,456. The whispers had grown louder now. I caught fragments. But she said, "And all this time, and how could we not?" I worked through the rest of the sequence methodically, letting each piece of evidence have its moment. Bank transfers, insurance payments, emergency repairs. 20 years of financial history projected 10 feet high, every transaction verified, every date confirmed. When the last slide faded, I turned to face Attorney Keating directly. He hadn't moved during the entire presentation, hadn't made a single note in that expensive leather portfolio of his. "I believe," I said, keeping my voice level, "your office required verified originals rather than scans. I trust these certified bank documents meet that standard? Attorney Keating pushed his chair back slowly and rose to his feet. His expression gave away nothing as he stood there, silent, the chandelier light reflecting off his wire-rimmed glasses. The moment stretched out like pulled taffy, everybody waiting for him to speak. Even the waiters had frozen in place, water pitchers suspended mid-pour. The silence stretched like a rubber band ready to snap. Attorney Keating adjusted his glasses and extended his hand toward me. "May I examine the physical documentation?" I passed him the 3-inch binder I'd prepared, tabbed by year and color-coded by transaction type. Just like I'd done for Mom's bills all those years. Everything in its place, every detail accounted for. You ever watch someone's professional demeanor crack just a little? That's what happened as Keating thumbed through the pages. His eyebrows inched higher with each certified bank document, each notarized statement, each verified transfer record. The room stayed dead quiet except for the whisper of turning pages. After what felt like hours, but was probably 5 minutes, Keating cleared his throat. "Based on this extensive documentation, I must revise my earlier position." He turned to face the whole room, lawyer mode fully engaged. "Previous statements regarding Miss Carver's alleged non-contribution to her parents' household are demonstrably incorrect. The claimed course of dealing suggesting absence or neglect is thoroughly contradicted by these records." I heard Brother's sharp intake of breath. His whole house of cards, the careful story he'd built about my supposed abandonment, was crumbling in real time. All those sidebar conversations with the lawyer, all those hints about my selfishness, dropped in just the right ears, gone in an instant. From the corner of my eye, I saw Sister's face flush red. She'd played her part too, backing up his version, with carefully chosen phrases like, "We never saw her helping," and "Someone had to step up when Melissa stepped back." Now those words were turning to ash in her mouth. A soft "oh" floated from somewhere near the back of the room. Aunt Margaret, I think. It wasn't a dramatic gasp or anything theatrical. Just that small sound you make when you realize you've been believing a lie, like a curtain dropping to reveal something entirely different behind it. For the first time since that awful birthday dinner, I took a full breath, the kind that goes all the way down to your toes. The weight I'd been carrying, the fear that Brother's legal maneuvering would somehow trump actual facts, lifted from my shoulders. But as the ripple of murmurs spread through the room, I noticed everyone's gaze sliding toward Mother. She sat ramrod straight in her chair, chin lifted in that way she had when she refused to acknowledge being wrong. The same expression I'd seen 1,000 times growing up, usually right before she'd change the subject rather than admit a mistake. My hand hovered over the laptop's touchpad. There was one more slide, the most personal one, the one that showed where all this really started. It was a simple thing, a handwritten ledger from 2003 in my careful accountant's script. The first time I'd started tracking what I was spending to keep their household running. At the bottom was a note in Mother's handwriting. "Thank you, sweetheart. Don't tell your sister. You know how she gets about money. This stays between us." That was her pattern, wasn't it? Playing us against each other, accepting help in private while maintaining a different story in public. For years I'd told myself it didn't matter, that keeping the peace was worth more than keeping score. I looked at her rigid profile, at the way she stared straight ahead, as if she could make reality conform to her preferred version through sheer force of will. Then I glanced around at the faces watching her. Cousins, friends, neighbors, people who'd been fed her narrative for years. People who deserved to understand exactly how deep this deception went. My finger moved to the arrow key. Sometimes the truth hurts, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be told. I clicked forward. I clicked one last time, and there it was. The mortgage statement filled the wall, pristine, official, with that beautiful paid in full stamp across the bottom. My signature stood out clear as day on the final transfer form, dated exactly 2 weeks after Dad's first heart attack. The amount was there too, $247,136.42. Every penny I'd saved from my consulting work emptied out in one shot to keep Mom in her home. Collective intake of breath swept through the room. You know that moment when people finally grasp the full scope of something? When the numbers stop being just figures and become a story of sacrifice? That's what I heard in that sharp, shared gasp. Aunt Rita's hand flew to her mouth. Uncle James started shaking his head slowly, his eyes fixed on the amount. Even Sister's friend Beth, who'd been one of the loudest to praise Mom's birthday speech, seemed to shrink in her chair. "This payment," I said, keeping my voice level despite the thunder of my heart, "cleared my account on February 3rd, 2015. The house has been secure ever since." I paused, letting that sink in. Every mortgage statement for the past 8 years bears my signature, not as a witness, but as the source. The room felt like it was breathing differently now. The whispers had changed from the shocked little bursts of before to something lower, heavier. These weren't just gossipy murmurs anymore. They were the sounds of people reconstructing their whole understanding of our family. I watched Mom's perfect posture finally crack. Her shoulders, which had been set like steel throughout my presentation, seemed to cave inward. The rigid line of her jaw softened. She didn't look at me. She was staring at her own reflection in her water glass, as if she didn't recognize the person she saw there. Brother had gone completely still. The kind of stillness that comes when you realize you've not only lost the game, but that everyone can see exactly how you tried to cheat. All those careful legal maneuvers, all those strategic conversations painting me as the absent daughter, dissolved by one bank statement that proved exactly where I'd been and what I'd given up. Attorney Keating cleared his throat. "Given this irrefutable evidence," he said, his tone carefully professional, "I will be updating my recommendations regarding the estate distribution. Ms. Carver's contributions will be noted and appropriately weighted in the final determination." He paused, then added more firmly, "There will be no penalty considerations." The word penalty seemed to echo. A few heads turned toward Brother, connecting dots about what he'd been trying to engineer behind the scenes. His face had gone from still to stone. Mrs. Lillian caught my eye from her corner seat and gave me the smallest of nods. We both knew what had just happened. A double collapse, personal and legal. Brother's careful groundwork for claiming I'd abandoned my responsibilities had crumbled. And Mom? The carefully curated image she'd maintained in front of her friends, the martyr mother, the gracious matriarch, lay in pieces around her designer shoes. I reached for my water glass, lifting it slowly. The projector light caught the crystal, sending little rainbows dancing across the mortgage statement still glowing on the wall. That document, that proof of love measured in dollars and dates, stood as both my shield and my boundary line. Never again would anyone question what I'd given. Never again would I let someone else write my story. Looking straight at the paid in full stamp, I smiled slightly and said, "The truth always pays its debts."